Hi, good to see you again. I'm going to explain the last part of chapter 20, and that will be our topic of study in the coming week, beginning on January. Let's see, today is the 15th, Friday, and beginning on the 18th, Monday, throughout the week. Now, we only have short video segments. Maybe you think they are not so short. Dr. Brasher is very long in his explanations, but I am trying to make things plain. But remember also you have your two tutors, Mr. Masood and Ms. Zunaria, who can explain things or answer questions that you might have. Because I'm in the United States right now, it is not so easy for contacting me, and I am involved in several things here. But you need to be keeping up with your homework and not getting behind, because we keep adding things. We are still going to cover chapter 21 and chapter 22 before we have our final exam. And it looks like I will have to change the dates for the final exam, because I've gotten an email from the vice rector this morning, and we have been given specific dates that we should give, that you should give your final exam. And it will be partially on Moodle, but we will need to do part of it online in an oral exam. So it will be partially both. So far, I have not given any oral exams, and keeping up with the homework and with the special projects, I think that the oral final exam will be the only oral that we have in Greek 3. So let's look at participles and finish chapter 20. I'm going to share the screen with you and look at our textbook. Here, we're in chapter 20, and I'm sharing the screen with you once more. And we have looked at in chapter 20.1.1, the present participle active, and you have several forms that you have to learn by memory: luon, luonta, luontos, luonti. The thing that saves us and helps us, of course, is that these forms are very similar to the third declension noun, sa, ossi, asas, onsen. The sigma is hissing here, but otherwise we have a, ossi, and then es, as, onsen, es, as, onsen. The neuter is a little bit different, but then here it again picks up ossi and then onsen. And you just have to remember luon and luonta as the plurals, the singular and the plural in the neuter form. Well, the participle is complicated, I know, because there are so many forms, but I will say that the majority of participles we will meet will be in the nominative case, and therefore either singular or plural. We will see a lot of them with on and ontes endings. A few in the feminine and neuter, but more often in the masculine. So do not be dismayed. It is not so difficult as you think. We looked at the weak aorist participle. Here we have, again, a different set of forms based on the aorist, the weak aorist or the first aorist stem, which adds a sigma, and then the endings are with alpha. And here we do have a sigma, but instead of, instead of sa os si, it's sa os anti, and then we have es as on sin. So we have third declension noun endings here with the aorist, and just a little bit of difference in the neuter. And again, as above, you notice that the feminine follows the first declension feminine endings that we learned back in chapter 6. We have a part of in the textbook that compares the aorist indicative with the aorist participle. And this is important that you review this section of the chapter, because students often overlook the fact they see something like aites and they think, this is from aiteo. This must be the third indicative, third person singular or something like that, or second person singular. And they forget that the indicative, when the aorist tense indicative usually has an augment, almost always has an augment. So it is lengthened to e tesa, and the endings are a, as, in, amen, et. So this is not a second person singular. It's participle because there is no augment here. So this chart of comparing the indicative with the participle, I think, should be very helpful to you. With all of these verbs, they're different verbs, how their stem changes when you add sigma, and so on. He explains liquid verbs, and liquid verbs are the ones the stem ends in lambda or mu or nu. And here's an exception in the notes in chapter 20.1, kaleo is one of the few eo verbs that does not lengthen e to eta before sigma. It's kales, kalesa, I called. Kalesa, not kalesa, which you would normally expect. We have the strong aorist participle, which is pretty simple, except you just have to remember the aorist stem and then realize the endings are not present tense because the stem is aorist. So it's strong aorist. And again, we have some comparisons. We have looked at the present participle of active of ami, and the endings here are actually fairly simple because they're the same ones that we saw before in the present tense, the present participle active of ami. Then he has some translation helps for the participle with present and past participle. And now you may be saying, yes, but you said we could translate loving and loving with the participle forms, even though it's aorist tense. And that is true, but this is also true, and we're going to see why in just a moment. So let me go on to ways things in chapter 20.2. Notice, please, the Greek participle is much more often used in ways that find no equivalent in English grammar. That is why we must learn the participle very, very well. And we will spend more time on participles in the next semester in Greek 4. When we are finished with Greek 4, you should be able to begin to read the New Testament, but you cannot do so unless you learn how participles, what the various ways they are used. Now we're going to come back to this, the uses of the participle, to how to translate, but I want to just look so you are familiar with chapter. You should know now these words. Vocabulary 20.1, words that are used in John 5. And before the Christmas break, we translated this part of chapter 5. So you should be familiar with these words now and know them. And you have a new set of vocabulary now in this coming week. I'm going to skip down to chapter 20.2.1. We learned already last week the present and aorist participles of me verbs. And there's nothing you can do except to memorize the main forms that he has given you here in the table. He hasn't given you all of them, but he's given you the main ones in the present tense, and in the aorist tense, the participle. Remember, we have not yet covered the present indicative of didomi. We don't know how to say I give or I am giving in Greek, or I stand or I am standing in Greek. We won't learn that to chapter 27 because he presents his material in a way that is easier to learn. Now, Dr. Campbell has already included the present tense, but this is misspelled, by the way. It should be, this E should not be here. But don't let Dr. Campbell confuse you. We are not yet learning the present indicative, but we are learning the present participle, deduce, dedusa, didon. And that's the present, and the aorist deuce, deusa, don. So these two tenses, present and aorist, we'll add the perfect in chapter 21. So you need to learn these well, even though there's not that many of them, these main forms. So you need to learn them well. And the reason is that they occur in the New Testament very often in compound forms, with a compound meaning a preposition is added. So you don't just have histemi, you have enhistemi or ephistemi or ephistemi with epi, the preposition added to the front. And you have a different word then when you add the preposition. So these are forms that will very often occur. What we want to look at today primarily is the middle and passive present participle and of what we have called deponent verbs up until now. You will, if you watch all of Dr. Campbell's videos, you will find that he does not like the term or the view or the understanding of a Greek verb as being deponent, as being middle or passive in form and being translated as active in English. He thinks there is a reason why the Greeks use the middle and passive voice, and that we should not skip over it and just call these forms deponent. That is true, but it is also intermediate Greek, and we are not yet at that level. We're beginning to do some things at that level, but we're not yet at that level. So I'm going to start here and say that when we have the word like dechomai, I welcome, we realized that this is middle or passive, that these do not have active endings, and therefore the forms of the participle are also different. It's not dechon, which we would expect with the present active. It's dechomenos, dechomene, dechomenon. The on, the mu and omicron and nu, dechomenon of the neuter form is not visible here on my screen, but you can see in your book, you can compare, and we need to learn the endings, the forms of the middle and passive participle of verbs like dechomai. And the plural dechomenoi, dechomenai, dechomena. Endings we would expect. So it's not so difficult. And quite honestly, the nominative forms, singular and plural, are the ones that we will see most often. But because we already know us and on and ois and as and on and ice in the feminine. These forms are actually easy to learn. Your homework, let me go there. Let me stop sharing this. And I want to take you to your homework. So we will go there. I'm going to share that screen. And here we are. You are asked to write. Let me get my spotlight back. You are asked to write out in full the present participle middle and passive of phobeomai, I fear. It is a middle and passive form, which is translated active, so we do call it deponent right now. It is missing an active form. That's what deponent means. And it has only the middle and passive, which we translate as still as active. I fear, not I am fearing myself, the middle, or I am being feared, the passive, but simply I fear. So it's an active voice. But there is a difference in form of phobeomai, and it has to do with the rules of contraction for epsilon omega verbs we learned in chapter 6. Now, I'm asking you to write out these forms so that you will learn the middle and passive forms from chapter 20.2, but also if we see number 47, if you look at number 47, the form that you need to look up, let's see, I thought I wrote it down. No, I wrote that one down. The form that you need to that is important to learn. Let's see, let me get text. And I'm going to write it here. I cannot write accents or breathing marks with the Zoom program, but now this is what we would expect. Phobomenos. This would be what we would expect the middle and passive ending, fearing. But in fact, because it is a middle and passive form, no, because it is an epsilon omega verb, there's a contraction. Instead of omenos, it's umenos. The verb is phobeomai. And so if we come down here and we write again in the accusative form, we will have to write phobu men on in the present tense. Now, if we write the feminine, phobu men a, and then the accusative. Remember, this is not an alpha pure word. It doesn't end in, the stem does not end here in epsilon, iota, or rho. So the feminine form is eta and not alpha. So I'm going to go back to writing here in the accusative, phobu men ein. and it will follow the feminine forms that we learned back in chapter 6, and so on. You can look them up and compare them to the ones that you see in the textbook with luo. The only difference is that here we have u instead of all because of the contraction of the epsilon with omicron. So this table you will need to fill out. Let's see, I'm going to have to stop sharing and share it again. Where's my homework? Here we were, I think. Yeah, okay. So that's your first job. And here's your second job now. Set part 2 is to parse the following verbs. From exercise 20.2, these verb forms need to be parsed. Now, why do we do this technical and tedious work, you might say? Because we need to learn the grammatical parts of these verb forms. If we learn those and learn to recognize them, we will be able to read more carefully. And so I'm going to go down the page here. I've given you a table, and you notice that when a form is actually indicative, these two fields are grayed out because there is no case or gender with an indicative or subjunctive verb. There can be singular and plural, and they do have person. So this field is white for you to write in. Singular, first person singular, first person plural, S or P. Then the tense, present or aorist, those are the only two we have had so far. We have had indicative or subjunctive or infinitive we can have here. We can't have participle because these two fields are grayed out. So it already tells you that number 9 is not a participle because these two fields are grayed out. I've done you a service. You now know the middle and passive. Another thing you can write here, though, is simply D. So you can simply put a D here under voice, and D stands for deponent. Or you can write middle or middle and passive. Either one is fine. Because these are middle and passive forms, the verbs are also deponent. So if you have a form that is middle and passive, I'm not sure number 9 is, I'm not looking at it right now. It may be active, in which case you would write active. But if it is middle or passive, either one of these is fine, deponent or middle passive. Now we're going to eventually have verbs that are middle and passive and not just deponent. So you may want to get used to writing middle and passive rather than D for deponent. But right now you can do that. Notice here, as we go further down, there is no case, gender, singular, plural, a person. So this must be an infinitive form. These fields are grayed out. So I've made things easier for you to recognize immediately. Now, if we come down here to number 33, pros er menu. Here's where you need to, now I'm going to have to make this field like this so I can write here, but please notice that this one here is grayed out. So I actually will not write anything in this space because this is person, and participles have lots of parts, but they don't have person. Only indicative and subjunctive verbs have person, first person and second person and third person, singular and plural. So now I have to get my text back. Let's fill out what are the parts of this participle. What are the grammatical parts? And the first thing we'll write is the case, and the case here is genitive. In fact, I'm going to use, I think, boldface. No, I can't. All right. Genitive. And the next thing I am asked is gender. And what I should notice is that this u ending, pros erch amenu, could be masculine or feminine. So I'm going to write, no, masculine and neuter, I mean. I'm going to write m/in because u, the u ending is the genitive singular. Notice I have, okay, so I have genitive, singular, and now I have singular or plural, and this is singular. And I don't have person, so I'm not going to put anything here, but I am going to put tense, and this is a present tense. Erch amenu, the aorist would be for go or come, I go, elthon. So pros elth, pros elthomenu, elt, if I have an aorist, second aorist, erchamai has a second aorist form, then if I have an aorist stem, then I would have right aorist here, but this is not aorist, this is present. I write participle. I will abbreviate it like this, PTC. By the way, if you have an infinitive, it's good to write INFIN on and IMPV for imperative later when we learn the imperative, because it can be confused with imperfect if you write simply IMP. But this is a participle, so I'm going to write PTC, and this is middle or passive, so I'm going to write MP. I could write D for deponent, and now I'm going to write the dictionary form. So I need to switch to Greek. Pros erchomai. And I have to switch to English keyboard and write go towards or come. Go or come towards is the English of translation of this. I don't translate the English of this because I don't have any context for it. So I'm always asking you only to translate. When we parse, we only translate into English the dictionary form, which is easier anyway. Now, I'm going to have to come back to get rid of that writing. All right, here in your homework, you're asked to translate John 9:1 and 2. Can I please ask you to translate your own work? Don't go to an English translation like the ESV, which is a good translation, or the Lexham English Bible, which is also a very good translation. Don't go to those and just copy them. I want to see that you have struggled. If you're not struggling with the text and learning to translate into Greek, learning why the author is using the words he is using, if you're not doing that, you're not learning. Yes, you have 12 verses. It's a lot to do, but you need to do your own work. Don't copy anyone else's, not from a Bible, not from um, not from another person. Now, if you want to go back and compare your work with the ESV, for example, or another English translation, that's fine. But please leave your work as it is. If you make a mistake, just cross it out. Um, but be sure and use the helps. You have those in the textbook. I'm going to share the screen here of the textbook. We go down after this. Now we have vocabulary 20.2.2, which is the vocabulary now that you should be learning, as well as the one before. You have these participles from that we have already learned. We've already had these forms, so they're not new. You had some new words here. Anabino, I go up. Katabino, I go down. Uthus, immediately, at once. And aorist participle of pipto, peson, pesusa, peson. But we have some more words here in vocabulary 20.2.2 with John 9:1-41. And you need to learn these words because they are used very often in the New Testament. Here is one especially that is called a masculine first declension noun, ha. So we know it's masculine because of the article is ha, mathetes, and it's declined a little differently. And here's another one, ha prophetes. He didn't provide the article, but it is also a, I think a female prophet can also be a prophetes. So that's maybe why he doesn't provided the article. Phoneo, I call or invite. So you need to learn, add these words to your vocabulary list. There are notes on the vocabulary and then some helps for translating John chapter 9. So we're going to spend some time translating John chapter 9 because it helps us to learn as we learn participles. Now, we're almost done. I know this has taken a while, but I need to also say something about the translation into English. I have made some notes here that I want to look at and use my spotlight. It's confusing a little bit the way that Dr. Campbell describes the uses of the participle and the way the textbook author, Dr. McIver, describes them. I'm going to suggest that we have three. A participle can be used as a noun. And if it's used as a noun, it always has the article. For example, ha legon is the one speaking. He legusa is also the one speaking, except we know it's feminine because this is feminine form. So we expect that's probably a woman speaking, but we don't have any context here. So we just translate the one speaking, feminine. Ta legon, the thing speaking, but it might be referring to a child, teknon, so that may be the reason it's neuter. So I will just put thing for neuter. I don't have any context for this neuter form, ta legon, the one, the thing speaking. Lego means to speak or to say, so I have to translate speak or say, but notice the ing form in each case. That is typically typical translation for participles. So that is one common use of the participle. If it has the article, it is often a noun. If it has the article, but it is modifying a noun, it is actually an adjective. Now, this is where I disagree with Dr. Campbell. He calls both of these the adjectival use of the participle. I find that confusing. I would call this a noun use of the participle and this the adjectival use of the participle. And for example, I've taken number 55 from the exercises at the end of chapter 20.2. And if we look at this in Greek, in English, Aden, he saw. This is a strong aorist, not Adon, not first person, but third person singular. Adon, Aden, he saw. Now who it was that saw, we're missing. It's actually Jesus. Ha Jesus, Eden, he saw Simona, which is the accusative form of Simon. Simona kai Andreon. Notice this looks like an accusative form, and it is. Ton Adolphon Simonas amphibalantos in te thalassa. Oh, what is it saying? Jesus, he saw, Eden, Simon and Andrew, ton Adolphon, the brother of, this is genitive singular, of Simon, the brother of Simon. And here we have a participle, amphibalantos. Notice here we have two lambdas, so this is a present tense participle. If it only had one, it would be an aorist stem. It would be an aorist participle. So it is amphibalantos with two lambdas, present tense, casting nets. This, because it modifies Simon, the brother of Andrew, is an adjectival form. It modifies a noun. The noun is Simon. Casting. Simon casting his net, actually. Amphibalantos means casting a net. It was usually a round net. That's why round, amphi, circle. This preposition we don't know yet, but casting into the lake, inte thalassa. This noun is like doxa. The dative is a and not alpha. So here we have it again. He saw Simon and Andrew, the brother of Simon, casting round fish nets into the lake, in the lake. The casting round fish nets, because that's what this means, is modifying Simon, the brother of Simon who was casting. Sounds much like a noun, but if a word modifies a noun, it's called an adjective. Now, the third use of participles, and this is where we will spend a lot of time also in Greek 4, is the adverb. And before we finish our time together, I want to share a screen just a moment. It's my camera, so that I want to look at the whiteboard I've set up just briefly, so you see another Greek participle used as an adjective. So now I don't have a spotlight I can use. So I'm just going to use my hand. I've got my phone over here being used as a camera on this whiteboard. And you notice the prophet, ha prophetes. This is the word for prophet. The prophet, and then ha huramenos. Now, right away, you should realize that you don't have heuriskomenos. You don't have a present tense. You just have the aorist stem, second aorist stem, the strong aorist stem. This is actually an aorist middle. We don't really get the aorist middle until much later at the end of Greek 4. So I'm not going to spend much time, but it's an example of how a participle can be used as an adjective describing a noun. The prophet, a noun. The prophet is the noun, is the subject. The prophet, the one who found. Why do I translate this, the one who found, instead of finding? Well, it is aorist. It doesn't have an augment. So normally you would say it's not past time. But remember, it's the context that decides really how a word should be translated. And we have to translate this as past tense because of what comes afterwards. I'm going to lift it up so you can see it. Or I'm going to lift down my camera. That may be easier. Yeah. I'm using my phone as a camera here. So the prophet who found God is calling, kaleo, kale, contract verb. Contraction takes place, is calling, proston theon in te glosse. Now here, pros doesn't mean with, it means to. Is calling to, ton theon takes the accusative, is calling to God in the tongue. Which probably means he's speaking in tongues. He is calling to God in the tongue. If you're not Pentecostal, you might say this can only be in the first century because many churches believe that this gift of tongues ceased with the first century. I'm not one of those, but my churches that I go to, I don't fuss about it. I do think there is a proper gift of tongues, but the main thing is we realize how this sentence is translated. The prophet who found God is calling to God in the tongue. If I take this away, I would just translate in a tongue, in glosse, in a tongue. He is calling to God in a tongue. Now, why did I translate the aorist participle as found instead of finding? Because the action has already taken place. He found God and he is now calling. You see, the context decides the translation of the participle. Now, hopefully, I'm changed back my camera to this. No, this is a long video to watch, but we will be soon finished. I'm going to go to, is it this one? No, I'm going to go to the textbook. That's what I wanted. Stop sharing. I'm going to share the textbook again. And we're going to go back to the uses of the participle, chapter 20.2. When, while, as after. This is the third use of the participle, which I forgot to share with you. Let me do that real fast. Again, we had three uses, and I should have actually written one as a noun, two as an adjective, and three as an adverb. And this is actually how most participles in the New Testament are used. We do find well, I'm not sure of the numbers, but we do find many used as nouns. We find a few used as adjectives, as we just looked at the prophet who found God. That's an adjective. It's describing the prophet who found. But also adverb, the third use. This is one that makes students find very difficult, and we're just going to start with it. And that is when we don't have an article with the participle. If we do have an article, then it's easy. It's the one who, or the one who found, the one who finding, or the aorist tense, usually the one who found. But what about if I don't have an article? Then it is probably used as an adverb. And the most common use of the adverb is what we call temporal. For example, Matthew 8:14, kai elthon ho Jesus estin oikion Petru eden. And after Jesus came into the house of Peter, he saw. Notice eden, he saw. Elthon is a participle. By itself, it does not have an article, so it's not the one who came. There's no article, ha elthon, the one who came. It's simply elthon. And the translation here is after Jesus came, he saw. Why do we translate after? There's no word for after here in this sentence. There's no Greek word for after. No, there isn't, because the Greeks didn't use the word after. What they did was they used a participle in the aorist tense. And because this verb is also aorist, he saw, and it actually does have an augment. It's just that it doesn't change to eta, it remains a. He saw, because this is past tense, this must be before. This happens before. So after Jesus came into the house, he saw. Because Jesus had to come into the house first before he could see Peter. The house of Peter. It's Peter's house. He saw, and then whatever he saw, I can't remember. But we translate after here. Or here, tauta epon Jesus ex elthen sun tois mathetais autu. Jesus said, apon, said, but this is an aorist, strong aorist. These things, tauta, tauta is a neuter plural. So I translate these things. After he said these things, Jesus ex elthen, he went out, sun tois mathetais. This mathetais is a first declension masculine. So it looks like feminine, but it's actually ha mathetais. So we translate, went out with his disciples. He went out sun tois mathetais autu. He went out with his disciples after he said these things. Because here, this participle is used as an adverb. No article, so we translate after. And many participles in the New Testament are temporal. They're not only, but many are. And another one he gives, after he found him, kai huron auton epen, he said. Huron is an aorist participle. We know that because this is an aorist stem. It's not heuriscon, that would be present tense. It's huron, that's the aorist tense of heurisco. After he found him, auton, he said. Now, this usage is quite different from English grammar, and it causes beginners to feel a certain amount of disorientation. But he goes on to say, if we learn we can begin to learn and realize that many participles in the New Testament are used as temporal, then we will be able to develop a translation strategy. And he has actually given you one. And here's how you need to approach participles. In chapter 20.2.5, you need to really read this carefully in the textbook. Does the participle have an article? If it does, the translation is straightforward. Translate as the one who. Usually the one who is finding, if it's present tense, the one who found, if it is aorist tense, because of the context. If the participle does not have an article, try translating it as a time reference, while. Present tense would be while, or when, either one of these, or as. If it's aorist, it would be after. And if the first two possibilities do not work, try translating it with an English participle, simply ing or ed. This is often quite satisfactory or can give clues as to what the function of the participle might be in the sentence. It could be, for example, adjectival, modifying a noun. But these are the three, this is the strategy here that you need to keep in mind as you continue now in doing the exercises in chapter 20.2 and in translating John 9. And I'm going to also include the some videos from Dr. Campbell, who's explaining the same material. Sorry that this video has been quite long. Maybe you looked at it in 2 times or 3 times and spent some time playing with your children in between. That's good, that's fine, as long as you watch the video and you learn how do we translate participles? What are the forms of the participle and how do we translate them? It will be very important that we get this information. God bless you and have a good week and good study of your Greek New Testament.